Hello everyone. Today's video is a Q&A video talking about why someone might not be able to tolerate glutathione, talking about COMT mutations, and also talking about cheap and best test for mitochondria. As per usual, nothing I'm saying should be construed as medical advice. This is for informational purposes only. If you need medical advice, please talk to your healthcare provider to get that advice. And if at some point you wouldn't mind, please taking a quick moment to like, share, subscribe, and or post a quick comment on the video. I'd really appreciate it. So thanks in advance for taking a second to do that. So the first question here is, I can't take any glutathione or glutathione precursors. Does it mean we have enough glutathione and are not deficient, or are we also deficient but still can't tolerate? So thanks for the questions. Really, really good questions. Obviously can't give any advice over social media on this, but just speaking about this academically, in my experience with my patients, taking a step back here, one of the unfortunate things, to my understanding, is that there really isn't a definitive objective test for glutathione levels. My understanding is that you can have your levels of glutathione measured, whether it's your serum levels of glutathione, looking at your oxidized versus reduced forms, or maybe the red blood cell levels of glutathione and their oxidized and reduced forms. So that can be done, but to my understanding, and love to know if somebody knows something to the contrary about this, because I'd love to have a really great test for glutathione. My understanding is that there really hasn't been research validation to tell us definitively whether those levels are actually reflective of a patient's overall glutathione status. And what I mean by that is, to my knowledge, there aren't any studies showing that if we measure someone's glutathione levels in their blood, today, tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day, that we're gonna see consistent levels from one day to the next, meaning that today it says I'm deficient, tomorrow it says I'm deficient, the next day it says I'm deficient, like every day is the same. So not having that type of kind of like reproducibility trial done, or that kind of like consistency trial done, it just really begs the question: if I test myself today and then test myself at 8 a.m. today, like, is that going to be reflective of my levels at 8 a.m. tomorrow, 12 p.m. the same day, overnight while I'm sleeping? So the testing exists, but is it actually reproducible? And then the other question would be, is the level of glutathione in my blood actually directly reflective of what is present in my brain, in my liver, in my eyeballs, in my lungs, and all the different tissues of the body, in my mitochondria? We just don't know. So just because it's at a certain level in the blood does not guarantee the levels are fine in other parts of the body. Not a perfect example, but decent example would be, why don't we use blood calcium levels to tell whether someone is osteoporotic? Well, because calcium is an electrolyte, and so it's very tightly controlled in the blood. But like, it's just an example of, like, we can't use that as a blood marker to tell us like how much is actually in the bone in the case of osteoporosis. So where it becomes to give you the most thorough answer possible here with this question, to say that, like, we know whether a patient's deficient or not deficient or whatnot, we're really basing, in my opinion, that more on what are the symptoms that a patient's experiencing, and then what is the response to treatment that we work with. So in my experience, from what as best I can tell clinically, when my patients are not able to tolerate glutathione or a glutathione precursor, in my opinion, it likely means that they are deficient in glutathione. Again, no objective test that I'm aware of that's going to tell us that for sure. But the reason I say that is because oftentimes in those patients, when we look at their genomic profiles and see genetically, do they seem to be really good at making glutathione versus having more trouble with that, oftentimes we'll see that they have genetic issues with glutathione production, as best we can tell. Like, we know there's a predisposition, at least, to them not being able to make glutathione as well. And then also in those patients, when we persevere and find the right form of glutathione, the right brand, the right dose, sometimes starting with very, 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 very low dosages and gradually building up, in not all of those cases, but some of those cases, we see a gradual improvement. So I believe that in at least a majority of cases I've seen, if they can't tolerate glutathione or glutathione precursors, it means they're likely deficient. The intolerance, in my opinion, in most cases is likely that by giving them glutathione, they're now detoxing excessively, and now they are reacting to their body's just like, are so used to not having enough glutathione. Now we've got some. Now we're clearing toxins, and we're just kind of bad at it. We're just not very efficient at it. It's not a seamless process. I mean, there are maybe a subset of patients who are very, very sensitive to sulfur, and so depending on the type of reaction that's happening, it might be a sulfur intolerance manifestation, not a detox reaction. And then every once in a while, it's reacting to some non-medicinal ingredient that's in the glutathione. That does happen from time to time. I just had a patient who seems to be reacting to the stevia that was used as a sweetener in the glutathione supplement that they were taking. So, maybe that there can be other confounding variables. I don't think that there's any compelling reason to believe, like it's reasonable to speculate, but like based on my clinical experience, I don't think there's any compelling reason to believe that a person would be reacting to glutathione or a glutathione precursor because they have enough already. I'd like that to be the case, because wouldn't that be nice? It's like, no, it's just telling you you're perfect, and isn't that great? But I don't think that's likely what that means. I'm going to leave it there because I've been talking about this more than I thought I would, but if there are any further questions on that topic, I'm happy to talk about that further. Next question is, could you make a video on antihistamine herbs for someone who has a messed up COMT profile, meaning can't take quercetin, etc.? So yeah, great question. I mean, COMT being catecholamine O-methyltransferase, it's a really important detox enzyme. It's used to metabolize quercetin, but also estrogen, norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, other things as well. So quercetin, to be honest, that's the only one that I'm aware of that requires COMT as a cofactor. So generally, if I see that a patient's flaring from quercetin, they have histamine issues, and whether or not I know that they happen to be have COMT mutations or not, I don't really take into account the COMT mutation when it comes to other mast cell stabilizers or histamine supports that I would normally recommend. So I'm not aware of COMT having any impact on pharmaceutical antihistamines like H1 receptor agonist or antagonists rather. I'm not aware of COMT mutations having any meaningful impact on things like black cumin seed extract or luteolin or PEA like palmitoyl ethanolamide, and then different cofactors like vitamin B5 and copper and vitamin C and vitamin B2, like different cofactors are some of the histamine metabolizing enzymes. I'm not aware of those having any meaningful impact in a negative way, at least on if someone has a COMT mutation. So yeah. So anyways, those are some of the histamine supports that I use, and I don't think any of them, except for quercetin, are meaningfully impacted by COMT. Again, if somebody knows something to be the contrary, please post in the comment section. I would like to know, but that's my understanding of it. And then the last question here, it says, what is a cheap and what is the best test for mitochondrial function? So I've posted some other videos about this before, so please feel free to search those on my YouTube channel. Easiest way to find my videos, I think. About testing for the mitochondria. The punchline from those videos, to save you some searching and save you listening to me ramble for 10 minutes, is there are tests that can measure certain elements of mitochondrial function, but in my opinion, well, not in my opinion, the fact of the matter is that none of them comprehensively test every element of the mitochondria, and in my opinion, there are concerns about kind of the efficacy/reproducibility of those types of tests. Not all of them. There's a test called the MitoSwab, which to my understanding is quite a reliable, reproducible test, looking at some of the function of the complexes in the electron transport chain of the mitochondria. But other tests like organic acid testing, for example, it's just, I think, only able to tell us so much. So I'm not saying it's a bad test, it's just not a irrefutable test. So in my opinion, the cheapest and best test to test the mitochondria is to walk up to a mirror, look in the mirror, and say, to the person looking back at you, like, do you have optimal levels of energy? And so just so this isn't construed as me giving any health advice, so if I was going to run the best test for myself on mitochondrial function, my mitochondrial function, I would walk up to a mirror, look at myself and say, do you have optimal energy levels? And if my answer was yes, then my mitochondria are just 5 by 5, they're just doing great. If my answer is no, I'm not at a 10 out of 10, I'm at a less than a 10, 9 or lower, then I do not have optimal mitochondrial function, because the mitochondria make all the energy for the cells for the most part, 90% plus of it. And if they're not cranking enough energy, I'm not going to be a 10 out of 10, and the person looking in the mirror is not going to be a 10 out of 10, and then that means there's some degree of mitochondrial dysfunction. So any further questions on that, I'm always happy to post videos about mitochondria. I hope this was of interest. Any comments or questions, just post in the comment section below.